and as I've told you, with the creme de la creme, we've left the best session till last. Now we pivot to something that every fintech player needs to think about, even if they don't want to, which is security. Nour Abd Eldayem, Cybersecurity Consultant at Liquid C2, is here to show us how security can actually become a growth enabler. From risk to resilience, let's see how security is evolving in an AI-powered world. Please welcome to the stage Nour Abd Eldayem.
Thank you for that great introduction and welcome everyone. I'm very happy to be here because I'm talking about something that's very near and dear to my heart, which is security. And as you can see from the title, my focus is going to be specifically on how security fits into the present and the future of fintech. Okay, clicker, thank you. All right. So before we start, I wanted to give a quick introduction about myself. I'm Nour Abd Eldayem. I work as a cybersecurity consultant in a Pan-African cloud and cybersecurity company called Liquid C2. I have been working in cybersecurity for a few years now. I first started as a penetration tester, primarily doing security testing for web and mobile applications for customers mainly in the banking, insurance, and telecommunications sectors. Recently, I shifted or pivoted to more general consulting, where I help customers with projects around risk assessments, compliance assessments, and overall how they can introduce security into their projects, into their systems, and into the organization overall. In terms of education, my background is in computer science, and I more recently completed my Master's of Science in Advanced Cybersecurity from King's College London. I also hold several industry certifications, the latest of which is the CISSP, which is the Certified Information Systems Security Professional Certificate. But more important than my background is why I'm here, and my mission and my goal is to advocate for why security needs to be top of agenda for the fintech industry, and how really security can enable and shape the future of fintech as we adopt more digitalization and we really move forward with a more technology-enabled future. So we have quite a few things on our agenda for today. First, I wanted us to take a look at some of the innovations and some of the new developments that we're seeing in the fintech industry. From there, we're going to look at, now that we've seen the opportunities that this industry has, we're going to look at some of the challenges and risks that these new technologies and new innovations pose on the fintech industry. And from there, we're going to look at where security fits in between these opportunities and benefits and challenges and risks. Next, we're going to go through some of the common misconceptions that I've been hearing about security, both within the security community and outside. And hopefully we can tackle these and debunk some of these myths. And because I understand that maybe many of you are going to be convinced that security is a big deal, but it can be really challenging to see what kind of first steps organizations can take to really secure themselves against these risks that we will see in a couple of minutes. I wanted to also share some resources that you can use to get started on security, and then we're going to wrap up and give some time hopefully for questions at the end. So the present and future of fintech. Fintech is really exciting. Over the last few years, it's been growing very rapidly. We're seeing a lot of innovation. We're seeing a lot of investments as well in this space. And with that, there came a lot of really new, interesting innovations and developments in that sector. I've picked a few that I've been seeing a lot over the past couple of years. The first of which is open banking. And open banking refers to the concept of introducing integrations into the financial ecosystem between the different stakeholders to allow them to share data, allow them to really come together to offer better, more seamless financial services or just solutions in general for their customers. It also promises better decision making for both financial institutions and as well customers as they engage in their financial services. A similar concept is embedded finance, which essentially looks at how we can directly integrate financial services such as payments or lending into services for or platforms for traditionally non-financial businesses. So for example, we see this already in our day-to-day. We want to purchase something online. I want to purchase a new laptop. And instead of needing to be redirected to a new platform or the payment gateway to make my payment, I can do that directly in the interface of the store that I'm purchasing my laptop from. And all of this is, of course, enabled with APIs or application programming interfaces, and is really exciting. It's making the payment process a lot more seamless for customers. A third and more general trend that we're seeing is new ways to bank. That now we have a lot more fully digital banking available. We're seeing a lot more buy now, pay later services being available for customers within the purchase workflow. We're seeing a rise in something called real-time payments, which essentially means that transactions are now initiated, settled, and cleared instantly. And also we're seeing the rise of green banking, which leverages technology to essentially help make the financial industry a lot more sustainable. Fourth one, and no industry seems to be immune from this, is the artificial intelligence trend. And fintech is no exception to that. Artificial intelligence holds a lot of promise for the fintech industry. It's already being used by organizations to do things like automate loan payment workflows, to enable insight generation and insight adoption, and also just across a lot of core and supporting functions in organizations. We see the use of AI in marketing and sales, operations, and even cybersecurity, of course, in the fintech industry. And finally, RegTech, which refers to regulatory technology, is really helping organizations tackle a lot of the regulatory requirements that they find themselves needing to comply with in their day-to-day. Generally speaking, banking has always been very regulated, but anywhere else, any other financial institutions that are non-banking have been traditionally more or historically more unregulated. But this is changing in the last couple of years. We're seeing a lot more regulation come up in that space, and so organizations are finding themselves having to navigate all of these complex regulatory challenges as they try, to introduce these new technologies and innovations into their work. So really, really exciting future, a lot of opportunities and benefits, but of course there is no free lunch. Everything that has opportunities and benefits can come with its own challenges and risks. And I kind of also again wanted to highlight 5 of the main risks that come with the use of these innovations and technologies in the fintech industry. One of the first is, of course, regulation. Generally speaking, fintechs, and especially because they were very relatively young startups, in the last couple of years, they've been moving really fast. And regulators have started to put a lot more focus on these smaller organizations and those that are really focused on introducing a lot more digitalization into their infrastructure. And so regulation becomes a big challenge, because if we don't comply with regulation, we might find ourselves at risk of fines, but also maybe even like the revocation of our licenses or our inability to actually practice in the market. So that's one of the first challenges. The second one is, of course, data security. With all this new technology, with AI, with digitalization, organizations are able to collect, process, and store a lot more data about their customers. And this data can a lot of times be personal financial data. And so data security becomes more critical, because not only do we need to make sure that we are collecting the data properly, we're securing it properly, but we're also protecting it against things like leakage, against corruption, and against deletion, which can really cause a huge problem for our organization. Third is fraud. This is generally one of the more traditional also financial challenges, and it becomes more interesting with digitalization, because with real-time payments, customers expect payments to be instant. This also means that things like checks for fraud or anti-money laundering also need to keep pace with that. And so it becomes really challenging to make sure that we are able to detect fraud, to be able to do anti-money laundering in that very, very fast-paced nature of payments today. Fourth is supply chain risks. So with open banking and with embedded finance, we're seeing a lot more integration between players in the financial ecosystem, which is really exciting, but it also means as an organization, I don't have to just worry about the things that affect me personally, but also all of the risks and the threats that can come to me from these different integrations that I have with my partners. I'm not only worried about, for example, my service being going down or losing availability of my own service, but also, what happens if one of the integrations I have in place with a provider also goes down? That's going to majorly affect my own business. And so this concept of, not just looking at risks that are directly affecting my organization, but are also affecting my third parties, my third-party providers, or some of my suppliers as well, becomes a major challenge as we integrate a lot more of the financial ecosystem. And finally, and this usually doesn't take a lot of airtime, especially with more interesting conversations around AI security and data security, But honestly, operational failures and infrastructure failures continue to be a major challenge if we don't do capacity management and resource allocation right. Because what's going to happen is we're going to move to the cloud, we're going to deploy our infrastructure, but if we don't do things like making sure we have our backups in place, we don't make sure that we have a high availability infrastructure, we're not going to be able to provide our services effectively. And no matter how amazing our services or how innovative our services, it's not going to matter if I'm not able to provide it to my customers reliably and consistently. So now we've seen the opportunities and the benefits and the challenges and risks. Where does security fit in? Security is there, and the goal of security is to make sure that organizations can leverage all of these technologies and innovations while maintaining minimal levels of risk. So this is the main goal. Security is there to service the organization's business objectives. Security is about let's introduce these innovations, let's introduce these new technologies, but make sure that we are keeping ourselves as little risk as possible that we have to deal with. And you're going to notice here that I mentioned minimal risk and not no risk. Because in reality, there is no innovation, there is no growth without some level of risk, and security is no exception. So security isn't about eliminating risk, it's about reducing risk to a level that allows an organization to effectively participate in the market and achieve its business objectives and goals. And I wanted to stress on this specifically because there are a lot of common misconceptions about what security is all about and what it's trying to do. And these are 5 of my favorites. The first one that we talked about, of course, is the elimination of risk. Security isn't about the elimination of risk. It's about the reduction of the risk to a level that is acceptable for the organization and enables the organization to achieve its business objectives. And one other one is, security is the department of no. Anytime an organization wants to do anything, they go to the security team and the security team says no. And that's not true, because good security is not just about saying no to everything. It's about giving decision makers the visibility that they need to ensure that the decisions that they make align with the organization's risk appetite or risk tolerance, as well as the goals or strategy that the organization has put for itself. So security isn't about, saying no to introducing AI into the organization. It's about, okay, if we want to do AI, if we want to introduce AI, these are the risks that can come from introducing AI into our environment, and this is how we can secure ourselves to make sure that when we do introduce AI, it's done securely, it's done effectively. And that's the first misconception. The second one is good security is expensive. And my response here is good security can be expensive because there are a lot of really cool security tools and technologies in the market that are quite fancy and can be quite expensive, but good security does not have to be expensive. There are many open source tools for a lot of open source options for a lot of tools out there, and of course they're not going to be the same in terms of the number of features, but they still can be very, very effective and very useful for organizations that have limited budgets. And beyond open source tools or beyond tools in general, a lot of the things we do for security have nothing to do with tools. It's about the people, it's about the processes in place. Because if people understand how to keep themselves safe online, they are more likely to be diligent with the company's data, and they are more likely to be able to stop attacks before they even come into my system. The third is we can worry about security later. You can. A lot of organizations and teams do that. But what happens at the end is we find that it's much more expensive and much less effective to introduce security at the end. If we do our testing early on, we're not going to have to deal with incidents or outages that are going to cost our company millions. Also, if we introduce security in the design phase and the requirements phase, this is going to make it a lot easier for us because instead of having to scramble to fix at the end of our development lifecycle, we're able to make sure that our architecture from the outset already introduces security from the get-go. Fourth is security is only an IT concern. And although, yes, it's true that security is usually, like day-to-day operations of security are the responsibility of a security team or an IT team, but really everyone plays a part in the organization's security. Because no matter how many tools we have in place, if someone opens a malicious link and they download some malware onto their device, no matter what tools I have in place, this is something that most of the time is actually considered one of the top challenges in security. So really security, everyone plays a part regardless of their role, their function, and their place in the hierarchy. So it's generally an organization responsibility rather than an IT or a security responsibility. And finally, breaches are a big company concern. Yes, big companies are usually more targeted, but hackers and their motivations come in all shapes and sizes. Some are financially motivated and so can really focus on the organizations that have more money. But also there are some curious students, some curious young attackers who just want to try out a new tool or a new exploit, and sometimes my organization can be that amazing target. So it's really about, and sometimes it's not even about the organization itself. I have an integration with a big bank, and this big bank was targeted for an attack, and then all of a sudden I am collateral damage. So breaches can be a bigger concern for bigger organizations, but risks are going to affect all parties in the financial ecosystem. And many have the same questions around, okay, I'm convinced security is important, what do we do now? And there are a few questions that I've been seeing a lot, like what should we prioritize? Do we need a separate security team? How do we make sure we do that balance? And all of it ultimately boils down to organizations wanting to understand where can they start. And I'll focus on maybe taking some 6 steps to start. I think we're running out of time, so we're going to go through these very quickly. The first, and this is my favorite, is doing the exercise of asking what can go wrong. Myself as a consultant, I use this question a lot for threat modeling and for risk assessments, but anyone, regardless of your role, you can ask this question and it will allow you to very effectively understand what can go wrong and what you need to put in place to make sure that you are securing your environment. And usually, actually, more than the consultant like myself, the product owners, the asset owners are the ones who are better able to answer this question. Second is introduce security earlier, and we looked at this with the misconceptions. The earlier you introduce security, the less expensive and more effective your security is going to be. Third is focus on foundations. Before we go and we spend a lot of money on our tools and our fancy tools, what we need to do is we make sure, the host firewall on my device is on, my antivirus is on, I have multi-factor authentication on, I make sure I use strong passwords, I make sure that when I'm reading emails, I'm diligent to identify some of the, a potential suspicious email. And so really, it's important to first focus on foundations before we decide, to introduce these more fancy or more complex systems or security controls in place. Fourth is leverage tools you already have. A lot of organizations already pay a lot of money for licenses for software, or maybe if you're on the cloud, you're going to find yourself you already pay for licenses for cloud resources. And a lot of vendors now already introduce security functionality into their products and softwares. So make sure that you are first enabling all of the security features before you look outside and try to look for tools. Make sure that you're leveraging what you already have in place. Fourth is automate. Nobody wants overhead. As a developer, the last thing I want to worry about is the security as well on top of the tasks I already have to work on. And so wherever you can, automate. Automate security testing in your development pipeline. Automate, for example, user access reviews. Automate making sure that patches are being applied on your systems. So wherever you can, definitely automate. And finally, and I wanted to end with this because notice that I haven't talked about any specific tools that you need to have in place. It's not about tools, it's about people first, and it's about processes second. And I kind of adopted this from the Agile Manifesto. The manifesto itself actually says people and interactions over processes and tools. But really I want to stress here is that tools really come after people and process. If we have the right process in place, we can make sure that we can use our tools and we can configure them a lot more effectively. And with that, some resources to get you started if you're interested to take your first steps in security. I tried to focus here on those that are freely available, those that also come with a lot of guidance, and not necessarily just for a security audience. And the first one is NIST, or the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They offer really great resources for how you can tackle risk management, cybersecurity, secure development, AI security, cryptography, key management, and so much more. And their flagship document is the Cybersecurity Framework. And I highly recommend that you take a look at this. It comes with a lot of great quick start guides and resources for small and medium organizations. Next is OWASP. And this is a foundation that publishes a lot of resources and research around application security specifically. It's very well known for its top 10 lists, so top 10 web vulnerabilities, top 10 mobile vulnerabilities, but they also have great resources around how you can do secure coding, how you can protect your organization against these top vulnerabilities. And also, more recently, they have a lot more AI projects coming up that can help organizations deploy AI securely. And finally, the CIS controls, which CIS stands for the Center of Internet Security. And this is an organization that also, again, publishes a lot of great resources around security and around how organizations can introduce the right security controls in place. And they have their critical security controls, which I definitely recommend you take a look at. It has a very nice listing of controls that organizations can put in across all their processes. But also the interesting thing about the CIS is they have benchmarks. And these benchmarks are great guidelines for if you are deploying anything in your infrastructure to do it securely. They have benchmarks for cloud, for operating systems, for hypervisors, for databases, and so much more. And it can be a great, easy resource. You know, you don't have to pay for a consultant to do this for you. It's already there. You have all of the steps that you need to get started with your security. And with that, I get to the end. We've talked about fintech, we've talked about the innovations, the risks, the challenges, and how you can take your first steps in security. And one parting thought I want to leave with you all is, with the right approach, security can be the differentiator in the fintech market. If you do your security right, if you take the right approach with security, it can allow you to really stand out as an organization with all of these innovations and all of these new developments in place and digitalization in the fintech industry. And with that, I want to thank you again. I think we have maybe a couple of minutes left for questions, so please go ahead. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nour, for this very insightful talk. And by that, we conclude our day here at the FinTech room. Thank you so much. ولكن before we go, we just want to thank you, Nour, for this talk. Thank you so much. This is a token of appreciation مننا.
Thank you so much.
يعني it's nothing compared to
لا
what
حلو
you
جدا طبعا. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing your insights with everyone here.
Okay, thank you. شكرا ليكم جدا. اوكي، رحت بقى هناك تمام.